Good afternoon. I'm going to create a budget for you in QuickBooks Online. First, I'm going to go to the toolbar in the upper right-hand corner, go to Budgeting, and that's going to give me the opportunity to create a new budget. When I hit on the new budget icon, I'm going to be able to create a budget from scratch, create a budget from last year's figures, and create a budget even from another budget or a prior year budget. It's going to bring up an interview screen. And from there, the only thing I really need to know is my fiscal year. So if your year ends in December or your year ends in June, most people are calendar year, you're going to need to know that so that the budgets can compare against the current profit and loss or income statement. You're also going to have a chance to subdivide your budget into customers, class, or location. So I'm going to hit the next button. And I'm actually going to create my budget from last year's figures. You could even create them from this year's figures, but I'm going to create them from last year's figures. Or I can just create a budget that's going to bring forward my account names and numbers. And I can do it from scratch, or I can copy from last year's budget or any existing budget that I have on file. Then I'm going to hit the next button. And I'm going to choose on this sample not to subdivide my revenue figures by customer. So I'm just going to hit on next. But you do have the opportunity to do that. And I'm going to name my budget. We're just going to call it Sample Doris 2016. And I'm going to just double check that I've got the correct year assigned to the budget. So this is going to be for this calendar year from January to December 2017. 16 actually. And I hit finish. And now it's created a budget. So it's going to give me a view of last year's figures. And I have it set to default by view by month, but I can actually view these figures by quarter. I can also view these figures by year, and I can view these figures by month. I also can choose not to show the blank rows, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to work with, I think. At the bottom portion of the screen, you're going to see an area where I'm looking at last year's figures, but things have changed this year, and I'm going to go into the cell. And I'm going to change my figures by month. I'm just going to say, well, this year I'm going to also have $900 a month in each of the first 3 or 4 months of the year. And then I'm just going to hit Save and Next. And so that's just going to modify. You'll see that figure go from $15,400, and that's going to bring that up to $19,000 at that point. I can also just put in an annual figure. It's rotating me to the next line, and I have a full budgeted item of $12,000. What I really like to do is just put in a single budget for this sample of $12,000. Let's say I'm going to get an increase in revenue, and now I just hit Save and Next. And that's going to take my figure from $12,000 now to $14,000 and evenly distribute it across the months. So I may go down to my lower portion and begin to edit and budget for my expense accounts as opposed to my revenue accounts. And last year, for instance, I had utilities of $2,500, which was unusual. And this year, I'm going to be passing along those utility costs. So I'm going to enter 0 and Save and Next. So that's going to change my expense amount for that line item. So now my utilities should read differently than what I had before. If they didn't, I'll just go in and make sure I'm more careful with that and just say my utilities are now and Save and Next, and that should do it. And it did. So that's all the editing I'm going to show you for this point, and I'm just going to, in a moment, I'm going to say I'm finished. But at this point, I could also rename my budget. I can actually do a point and rename my budget to Final, for instance. Sometimes you get a lot of versions of these going, and I'm just going to say OK there. And I'm finished with my budget. So if I want to return to see how I've done on that budget, I go to All Reports, which is located under reporting, and I go to budget overview, and that's going to default and show me a view of my budget for the year. And I'm actually I could look at it by month like I just set it up, or by totals, and I don't want to see the zero amounts. And I go through the selection criteria, as well as you can see I've chose the right budget. Make sure I got the right budget here, and I can now run a report, and that report will show me my entire budget for the year. I can further customize or collapse that by subtotaling at this point, and that's it. That consolidates my budget income and expenses. So that concludes actually setting up a budget, viewing a budget. Thanks for listening.